Hi, I'm Dr. Steve Hassan. Welcome to my live stream. It's Wednesday, September 3rd. Hope you had a nice Labor Day weekend. And so the summer is officially over and the fall is here. I wanted to start out by just mentioning we have a fascinating guest on our podcast and Substack, Ann Nelson. Anne wrote The Shadow Network on the Council of National Policy, the group that was private billionaires, right wings, who have been working for over 40 years to take down our liberal progressive democracy. And I interviewed her about her book on how there was an active German resistance when Hitler was in power, and it's a fascinating book, Red Orchestra. And she has a documentary called Bad Faith I highly recommend. And next week we have Dr. Bandy X. Lee, who I've interviewed previously. Bandy's a forensic psychiatrist who wrote or edited The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, and The More Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, and The Most Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. And she, like me, have been largely censored by the mainstream media. Fascinating conversation. Please check out my Substack, Stephen Hassan. We're asking people to please subscribe. We're generating a lot of subscriber-only content. I'll be doing more things on Substack with people like Monty Mader, Lev Parnas, Michael Cohen. So we're building a community on Substack and my YouTube. So let's start with September 3rd. What's happening? Well, there are a group of Epstein trafficking survivors in Washington, D.C., speaking about the Epstein trafficking ring. And a Republican congressman helped to sponsor that. I was looking at a clip earlier that there was flybys during the press conference. One wonders if Trump ordered that to disrupt the press conference, but no matter. The word is Trump is telling all Republicans that if you vote to reveal the Epstein files, it will be considered a hostile act against the administration, and be forewarned. So an outright threat by Donald Trump. He's that afraid that the truth will come out. People will see him in his trafficking glory, which we already have overwhelming evidence that he liked underage girls, especially ones that look like his own daughter. Best friends with Jeffrey Epstein, and he just wants this to go away, and it's not going away, much to his chagrin. He looks more and more awful. There was some conjecture whether he was dead or ill, but that brings up a point that I want to say is that so much of what's happening, especially in digital media, is emotional manipulation for the purposes of capturing your attention and your time and influencing your mind. So everybody knows my work, my company is called Freedom of Mind, and I've been beating the drum that intelligent, educated people from good families with religious education can be deceived. Our minds can be hacked. And still, there are so many people walking around thinking they're invulnerable to this, and not only thinking they're invulnerable, but blaming all the people who got tricked by Donald Trump and the GOP and all of the media manipulations to vote for Trump and vote for GOP individuals. And it reaches a tipping point where people have had enough. And the critical thing that I want to emphasize in today's Q&A and our ongoing work is our best and biggest resource is human beings. There's a lot of really smart, talented people who oppose the Trump cult and the authoritarian fascist takeover and the dismantling of the checks and balances and rule of law, and want to see like a sane society again, want to have real statistics for labor, for example, do not want our economy to falter and fail. And so what I want to say to everybody is you have an obligation, not only to yourself, but to your family, to your children, to your grandchildren, to your great-grandchildren, to your cousins, your nephews, your nieces. We need to be really focusing on learning how the mind works, how social psychology works, what are the tricks, what are the tactics. And when it comes to this information environment that we're in with digital media, we need to spend our time with trustworthy sources. And I think it's a real mistake for people to do doom scrolling, because when we're doom scrolling, we're in like a trance state where we're not critically evaluating, we're reacting to things. And through repetition, things get inside of our head that should not be inside of our head. We want to be clear-minded, and we want to build real relationships in the real world. The tech bros, the billionaires, the Peter Thiels, the Musks, the Zuckerbergs, the Bezoses, etc., they want us to believe that AI is God and that it's the future and that people are not going to matter as much. So it doesn't matter if millions of people die from not being vaccinated or having weather forecasting to protect us. It does matter. So people need to speak up, and not just on the street in protests. That's fantastic. But also speak to people in your neighborhood. Do you know your neighbors? Are you sharing uh, connection with these folks? And the biggest mistake, and forgive me for my long-term listeners, they've been hearing me say this for years, the biggest mistake is trying to argue or persuade someone out of a mind control cult by attacking the leader, the doctrine, or the policies. It doesn't work. It's counterproductive. So stop. Don't keep doing what doesn't work. What does work is listening with empathy, with warmth, with curiosity, building a relationship, finding common ground, and asking good questions, waiting a long period of silence for the person to think about a response, and then do a follow-up question and a follow-up. So the goal isn't to persuade the person to come to your point of view. The goal is to empower the person to reflect for themselves, for them to think for themselves, make decisions for themselves based on real data and real experiences. And if you're in the streets and you're seeing ICE do horrible anti-democratic, anti-habeas corpus things, I think it's completely understandable that you will be outraged and yell. But my 2 cents is, think of the people who are agents. Yes, there's a whole slew of them that Trump gave unconditional pardons to, many of whom were criminals beforehand, pedophiles beforehand, gang members beforehand. But many really good people are now involved because of the money with ICE and with the military that are being dispatched, National Guard, not just to DC, but they want to send the National Guard to Chicago and Baltimore. These are people. and there's somebody's son or daughter, somebody's father or mother, talk to them as people and ask them, do you really feel like this is the American way? I get that you've been given orders, but don't you find it hard to sleep at night sometimes, thinking about innocent people who are being rounded up and put into detention centers? So my appeal is be human. Don't lose your humanity. You can be angry at Trump. You can be angry at the GOP. But when you're interacting with people, you're going to touch them more by your humanity. And believe me, millions of people who voted for the GOP and MAGA are having doubts, serious doubts. But everybody has different doubts. Different things matter more to them. So they may be more worried about Medicaid and some loved one who's not going to have health care in another year. They may be more worried about health care being dismantled and caring about getting proper medical advice. Find out what people are what their backgrounds are. And one exciting thing that I'm seeing more and more are Christians who know the Bible talking to Christian nationalists and dominionists and New Apostolic Reformation, people who want to take over the government, and quoting the Bible to them and appealing to them to go back to what Jesus's teachings are. I think that's really, really valuable and important. And if you're an atheist, you still can learn how to talk to a theist in a way that's respectful and gets them to question. I have so much more to say, but yes, good. Let's start with some of the questions. So Focus Lady asked, what's your opinion about Dr. Martin Seligman writing an article about the misuse of the definition of learned helplessness to stop it being used to blame survivors for perpetrator actions? I did not see Seligman's article. Did he write one? Please email a link to center@freedomofmind.com. Seligman, who I've met in person, is the father of positive psychology. And the notion of learned helplessness was really an animal study where, for example, an elephant is a chain around one of its legs for years and years and years, and then the chain's taken away, but the elephant doesn't wander off. It's that kind of conditioning, programming. But what I want to say to all beings is we're resilient, we're resourceful, but you need to have hope. And the way to have hope is to know your purpose, to know what your values are. And here I'm going to cite Viktor Frankl and his incredible survival tale of 4 concentration camps. He's the father of logotherapy. And he survived the most egregious assaults that anyone can imagine. But he wanted to see his wife again. Unfortunately, he didn't know that she had already been murdered. But he wanted to teach what he's learned as a psychiatrist, that we need to pursue fulfilling behaviors. We need to have a reason to live. And so many people are throwing up their hands saying it's hopeless, it's hopeless. And it's not hopeless. I admit it's looking grim that there'll be free and fair elections next year based on the militarization of the National Guard. But it's only going to be effective if the overwhelming number of Americans self-censor and go binge watch, movies and play video games and don't get actively involved. I want to especially appeal to 18 to 35-year-olds, especially if you ask people, are you registered to vote? And if they're not, register them. And as much as I have major problems with the Democratic Party and all their blunders and errors, it's the only party that can defeat the GOP, and we could potentially win back the Congress and the Senate. So I am saying that. Let's see. Deconstructing Mental Health on TikTok asks, I just posted a video wanting to do a book club on the Red Hat book, The Cult of Trump. What do you think will happen to MAGA when he expires? So I am grateful that people are starting to read my book, The Cult of Trump, in book clubs. And if you haven't been following my live streams and my messages for the last bunch of weeks, I've been saying that when Trump started criticizing Putin, and Putin told people like Tucker Carlson and Alex Jones and other pundits to push on the Epstein files, the writing on the wall was that Donald Trump was being moved out of power because he's not doing what his masters want. And the issue is, will the public accept Thiel's choice of Vance to be the leader of the United States? We know that Vance will do what he's told and will read the script that was written for him. So in terms of the authoritarians behind the cult of Trump, that will be much better than Donald Trump, who's a loose cannon and who is obviously very ill and demented for many months. But the question really is, how many people are following Donald Trump versus how many people have been indoctrinated into Truth Social and Fox News, etc.? And it is very interesting. Murdoch, put out critical stuff about the Epstein files and caused Donald Trump to threaten to sue the Wall Street Journal for doing that. And I heard the Epstein estate's going to make that birthday book public. And I heard that the Epstein victims are prepared to put out a list of their own of clients because they were raped by these people. So, but if you think back, a lot of people voted for Trump because they thought he was going to clean the swamp. And they made all of this demonization of the Democrats as traffickers when he was a trafficker himself. And that's part of the mind control that I explained in The Cult of Trump, the notion of projecting onto others what he himself was doing. Positive one on TikTok asks, so you're saying that MAGA is a cult? I am not only saying it's a cult, I'm saying it's an authoritarian cult. And I invite you to look at my influence continuum graphic. It's on freedomofmind.com. You can download it for free. That talks about ethical influence to unethical influence. And unlike some of my colleagues and peers who say that if you're using the word cult, it always means something negative, I disagree. There's too many uses of fandoms and cult classic films that is not a negative use of the word cult. So, but I'm criticizing Donald Trump as being a malignant narcissist, which is the stereotypical profile of all destructive cult leaders based on Adolf Hitler's profile. In chapter 3, I compared Trump with Jim Jones of the People's Temple, Moon, my former cult leader, and Hubbard of Scientology. And my thesis in The Cult of Trump is there are many authoritarian cults that bring their millions of followers to follow Donald Trump and the GOP. So please check it out. I'm speaking as a former member of the Moonies, a destructive authoritarian cult. So obviously, I don't believe that you have to be stupid or gullible or have a weak father figure or not have a religious background to be lied to and tricked and have your mind hacked. Yep, that was already asked. Let's see. West Point on TikTok says, "Wow, I read your book about cults years ago. Maybe combating cult mind control." That's my 1988 initial book that I've updated several times, and I'm about to release a new 2025 introduction and update. Anyway, read my book on cults years ago. Here you are now on my FYP for your page. Hello. Thank you. Yeah, so I've been helping people for 49 years. I have 2 masters and a PhD. And I'm doing a study right now at bitemodel.com, free and anonymous, where you can literally answer 20 questions, and then we have a 40 question, and it will give you a number of how authoritarian or healthy on the influence continuum, what you filled out. And by doing this, you will be contributing to science, because one of my main goals is to provide a scientific instrument for the justice system to use to evaluate organizations or countries or relationships. And I can tell you, every religious mind control cult in the world does not want me to succeed in having a scientific frame to evaluate them, because, at least in the United States, they could lose their tax exemption status if it ever became accepted as law. And why I'm confident it will be effective is because it's based on already existing anti-trafficking legislation. It is a crime internationally to use fraud, force, or coercion, and the BITE model includes all three in robust detail. Let's see, Charles 25, in regards to being online, how do we tell Gen Z not to be online so much when it is the main place they get their news? YouTube, TikTok, when a lot of us feel like the media is bowing to Trump's threats. So the best way to influence Gen Zs are other Gen Zs, honestly, not old fogies like me. My son's 22, and I didn't give him a smartphone until high school. He had a flip phone, and he was very upset because his friends had smartphones. But people were taking sex pictures and sending them to each other. That's how I'm dating myself. That was the danger back then. Now things have gotten so much worse. So what to say? First, model good behavior if you're a parent. And do you need to be online so many hours in a day? And are you really trusting what you're learning on TikTok or YouTube? The question for me goes back to, what's your source, or who are you trusting? And I believe in vetting people. Like, I want people who are real experts with real credentials, verifiable. Many of them have written books. They've been consistent, and they're honest people. They're not going to lie just to get more followers. And it's a real issue of where people start bending their values to get more followers and using tricks to capture people's attention. And so life's precious, and go into the woods, like smell the air. It's going to help your brain. Sleep 7 to 9 hours a night. Eat healthy food. I've stopped drinking alcohol, and I liked my alcohol, my wine drinks, etc. And when I feel the need to drink alcohol, I'm honestly drinking tequila. the best I can find, and having a shot, and not, wanting to get inebriated, but just to chill out. I'm healthy, and I want to be, and I want my brain to work. And the best way to have your brain health is to use it and learn. So I read books, I listen to podcasts, and I really want to keep contributing to this effort to educate the planet that really the law is 100 years out of date. Let's see, we're getting a lot of questions from TikTok. I hope we can get some questions from Substack, but maybe we're getting more attention on TikTok. Let's see, Emma asks, what do you recommend for people recovering from brainwashing? Great question. So if you identified that you have been the victim of a person who was gaslighting you and programming you, or were raised in an authoritarian family system, or raised in an authoritarian religious or political cult, or you were raised in an authoritarian dictatorship, once you can identify that that was what you were exposed to, people need to understand what's normal and what's healthy. That's part of recovering, is you can react against what you didn't like about your upbringing and the indoctrination, but you also have to learn what's healthy and what's normal. And for me, when I first got out of the Moonies, I wanted to understand Chinese communist brainwashing. So I started reading books written by former American military intelligence people like Robert J. Lifton, Jolly West. Edgar Schein wrote a great book called Coercive Persuasion. Later, Margaret Singer wrote a book, Cults in Our Midst. So I wanted to understand what happened to me, and looking to models of what is brainwashing, what's the history of it, I could compare and contrast my own experience with what I was reading. And I do want to comment that because when I was in the Moonies, I was sleeping 3 to 4 hours a night and literally not reading anything except cult literature, my brain became mush. And I literally had to buy a 400,000 word dictionary and reteach myself what words meant, and to get all the loaded language out of my head. And remember, I was an English writing major, right? And get my brain working again. And the analogy is your mind is like a muscle. If you break it and you're in a cast, first thing you do is physical therapy. Push yourself, expand your brain. There's more to say, but I would highly recommend reading Combating Cult Mind Control. I have a course for former members on the foundations. I have a workbook that's over my right shoulder, Understanding Cults, that go along with the course. Educate yourself and interact with healthy people from other groups, not just the one you left. Let's see, I'm having trouble reading the name because it's so high up, and I'm seeing some 2, 3, 4. Oh, thank you. Scarves. Aren't all parties the same in the USA? Certainly appears so from the outside, just slaves to the lobbies and in lobby in particular. So if you read The Cult of Trump, in chapter 7, after Putin and Russia as the main puppet master, I write about a cult called the Family. And my former cult called itself the Family, and about 100, 200 other cults call themselves the Family. But this was a particular group that was founded in the post Korean War, Cold War era. They do the National Prayer Breakfast, and Jeffrey Charlotte wrote 2 New York Times best-selling books about this cult, and a very good Netflix series called The Family. And they recruited Democrats and Republicans into this cult. And lest you think that only Republicans were members of this cult, it ain't so. in the Netflix series, you'll see that Hillary Clinton was involved with the family, and so was Barack Obama. And you can ask, how is it possible that they could be involved with a destructive cult? Well, we're talking now about money and power. And if people want to run for any office, it's become so corrupted because of the Supreme Court's decision. And I hesitate to say it's called Citizens United because, like all Orwellian doublespeak, it's the opposite of citizens being united. It's corporations and dark money united. So there's corruption all the way around, but are they equivalent? In my opinion, not at all. And when Al Gore lost the presidency by 500 votes because the Supreme Court said so, he just conceded the election. The GOP cheated over and over and over again. I can give you direct evidence for that fact, even back to Reagan's election and his campaign advisor, William Casey, according to Craig Unger's book, Den of Spies. He made a deal with the Iranian terrorists to hold on to the American hostages so that Jimmy Carter would lose a second term so that Reagan could get elected. So much dirty stuff. Let's see. Christopher Jones. If Jesus showed up and ran for president in 2028 on the platform that human empathy is more important than personal wealth, do you think Trump adherents would call him a libtard to his face? Well, hypothetical. A lot of Trump adherents think of themselves as Christians. And so, thank you for that, Jerry. A lot of them think of themselves as Christians. And so the question would be, would they accept Jesus if he came back again? I'm not sure. But the whole notion of empathy is deeply embedded in the Jewish tradition and in Christianity, in the Abrahamic tradition of opening your tents to strangers and giving food and water to anyone in the desert who needed it for survival. So I said earlier, I'm very appreciative of Christians making their voices known, quoting scripture, talking about Jesus. A special shout out to Monty Mader, who escaped a Christian nationalist extremist upbringing in Wyoming on a cattle ranch and being corporally punished. And she has 1.6 million followers on Instagram, Monty Mader. She interviewed me for her podcast. I interviewed her for mine, and then we did an Instagram live, and I asked her to do a Substack live with me, which has yet to be scheduled. Let's see. Svi Harkin, don't low empathy authoritarians believe their projections? So the whole thing that's been missing, and as a mental health professional, I'm in a position to opine on, is what Eric Fromm referred to and Adorno after World War II talked about authoritarian personalities. And what we now understand is from developmental psychology, it all comes down to how secure did a baby feel in the first few years of life? There was some really horrific parenting advice of let the child cry and don't feed the child on command and beat the crap out of a baby if the child is crying. So the whole notion of corporal punishment and not, loving your child unconditionally and feeding it and hugging it and singing songs and reading books to your child it creates a distortion in the sense of self. And this, we now believe, is the root of all personality disorders, this lack of secure attachment or disorganized attachment. And so, can this be corrected in adulthood? The answer is yes. We have a lot of flexibility in our brains to rewire our brains, but it requires specialized counseling. Seth, is the cult movie Ticket to Heaven 1981 based on you? No, it isn't. It's one of the early movies. I believe it was based on a Canadian young man. That the book about his story was Moonwebs. I believe the movie was based on him. I was a leader in the Moonies, so while I did do some fundraising on the street, which was the subject of that particular movie, I have to tell you this quick story. As a Moonie leader, and I was like sleeping 3 to 4 hours a night, when I went to a program where I interacted with full-time fundraisers in the Moonies called MFT, I thought to myself, these people are zombies. These people are brainwashed. And I was totally brainwashed. I thought that God wanted Nixon to be president, and I thought Moon was the Messiah. But I was looking at the people as portrayed in that movie and going, all they were doing all day long was selling, lying to gain money for the cult so it could buy more property. Check out Combating Cult Mind Control. Chapter 2 is my Mooney story, and I believe I put Chapter 2 up on freedomofmind.com for anyone to read who doesn't want to read the whole book. Let's see, Larry Robbins, say the URL again for the questionnaire. Thank you, bitemodel.com. And it is a scientific survey. It's free and anonymous. You can fill it out for healthy groups or unhealthy groups. And we really want to test out the first 20 questions, see how they compare to the 40 question bite model questions. And so it's really going to be helpful. So that's bitemodel.com. Please check out my Substack. We're asking people to please consider a $5 a month contribution. I know a lot of people go and get a coffee in the morning, and it's even more than $5. By doing that, if we can get a lot of people donating, then I can afford to expand my messaging platform. I can do more books. I can do courses. Please consider supporting Freedom of Mind. Let's see, Zakhtar Neon Raven, who knew undue influence was a thing. Wait, extortion is undue influence. Yes. So it's undue influence is not a term used in normal language. It really comes out of the law. And the law talks about due influence, which is ethical influence, and undue influence. And the first laws about undue influence are over 300 years old, British common law, but it was about property and people who were being tricked out of not giving their property to their children and their heirs, but being tricked to give it to the church or to give it to caretakers. So laws were put into place, but it was really not about trafficking and taking over people's identities, which is what we're seeing today. Let's see, Mark Day on Substack asks, is there any value in telling a loved one that they are in a cult, or does that just push them further in? It does push them further in. But it's the number one mistake that people make when they see a loved one getting radicalized is they go, are you getting into a cult? That sounds really culty. And that puts the person who's already in the recruitment honeymoon phase on guard. They're going to report their recruiter that mom or dad or sister or brother or friend said this, and they're going to distance from you. What I do recommend is check out my TEDx talk, How Can I Know If I've Been Brainwashed? And ask somebody to watch this TEDx with you about this guy, meaning me, who is in the Moonies, and my talk about it, and watch it and pause it and talk with them. What do they think about what Steve Hassan is describing? Because it will put seeds in place for people to do their homework on their own. And one of the beauties, by the way, of bytemodel.com is people can confidently, no one knows that they're going and putting in information about their own group. They can find out how authoritarian the group is. That was another reason that I made it free and anonymous for people to check out. Let's see. Jenny Bloom on TikTok asks, do you have suggestions for initiating conversations and reconnecting with family members who are influenced by the cult of Trump, to the point of being unsafe to someone who is queer? I'd like to reconnect with family, but their brainwashing made them unsafe. Maybe they still are, but I feel we really need to heal divides right now. So I'm not exactly clear by your question. Are you the person who's gay or queer and distanced yourself, or there were other people in your family that were mean to a sibling or someone else in the family who felt unsafe? The bottom line is if you had a warm relationship previously, build on it. Dig up old photos, videos, reach out to the person and say, I miss you. I want you back in my life. What can I say? What can I do to make it okay for us to be together again? And often people in the cult of Trump will say, you called me names and you called me a moron and you blocked me. And you say, I know, I feel so badly about it. And here's the golden sentence I recommend. If I could go back in time, knowing what I know now, I wouldn't have done it. Will you please forgive me? And then ask for a redo or a reboot. Can we start over again? We can start slow and little interactions till we can build trust. And it's always better to meet in person, in my experience, with human beings than to text or to even to be on video call. But video is better than just audio, in my opinion. Let's see, Sarah, did you know that the clip feature to share important parts of your live stream isn't working? No. I tried to share a clip, but it kept not working like it should. I don't think that's a random glitch. I don't know. We're using a platform called Ecamm. We've attempted to use Riverside to do some live streams. There are some advantages to this and not to go onto multiple platforms. But I have no doubt that there can be bad actors trying to sabotage my work. Just all I can say is be in touch with us. Videos of my live streams will be on our YouTube, and my team will make clips, and we can share them.
I'm sorry, Steve. I'll break in for a second. This is Jerry, his producer. We did check the feature, and it is working. If it wasn't working previously, it is working now. So if anyone does want to share, we would love for people to share clips of Steve's live streams if they want to share them. That feature does work on YouTube.
Thank you so much, Jerry. Appreciate you. Yeah, Jerry's a volunteer. It's like, Steve, your message is too important. I want to help you get the word out. And I won't embarrass Jerry and say he's famous, but he's famous. He's a star. X-Star, Neo and Raven, Epstein, and Maxwell were extorters and used undue influence. Donald was their best friend. Yes, correct. Don't believe anything Ghislaine Maxwell says. Listen to the trafficking victims who were abused and directly sexually abused by Maxwell. She wasn't just a recruiter. She enjoyed herself to take advantage of young people. Let's see. Lilian Substack asks, what does freedom of mind mean? Free will the same. So freedom of mind is a bigger concept than just the human rights, United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So when I talk about freedom of mind, I'm talking about behavior, information, thoughts, and emotions. And if you're in your authentic self, the locus of control for your life and your thinking and your feeling is in your body. And you're deciding for yourself. When you're in a mind control cult or an authoritarian cult, a pseudo identity is created in the image of the cult leader or in the ideology. And that pseudo identity is dependent and obedient and is trained to believe your authentic self is evil and needs to be suppressed. And so we call that an external locus of control for your decision making. So when family members talk to a cult member and they say, can you come for grandma's 85th birthday party? The cult member will say, I'll get back to you on that. And they'll go and they'll ask permission and often not get permission, or they'll be told they can go if they have one member with them or something. Whereas if it's your life and you get to decide, you don't need to ask anybody. You're listening to your intuition. You're using your critical thinking. So it's we're embodied minds. And so that's what we're teaching. It's your mind and only you should control it. Let's see. Patrick on Substack asks, why would 47 use the term hoax during the presentation by the victims earlier today? Is this an extreme form of denial? So read The Cult of Trump. I talk about the fact that one of the major mind control techniques Donald uses and other cult leaders is projection. So Donald Trump talked about the Russian hoax. There was no hoax. Russia had recruited him in the 80s. The Mueller report documented Russian agents, even named them, interfering with the 2016 election. So the understand the use of loaded language. This term I first learned about from Robert Lifton, one of his 8 criteria of brainwashing from his 1961 book, Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism, a study of brainwashing in China. Loaded language is language used by a cult to stop thinking. It's just compressed, platitudinous, trite. So fake news, for example, is another version of Trump saying it's a Democratic hoax about asking for the Epstein files. The interesting thing is people aren't buying it anymore because he's been using the same techniques over and over and over again. And people are pretty much smart and can start to see the patterns and realize they're getting manipulated and abused. Let's see. We just got banned from TikTok Live again due to mass reports from MAGA. So this is known as censorship. And so come join us are we on Instagram? Are we on Substack? Are we on my YouTube? Are we streaming on LinkedIn? I'm not sure. But I think this is the 5th time we've been banned on TikTok because talking about the cult of Trump. And China owns TikTok, and they don't want people learning about brainwashing and mind control. It isn't just the cult of Trump. She does not want the Chinese people to understand what brainwashing is and how it's a mental health disorder. It's a man-made mental health disorder that's curable. Let's see, X-Star Neon Raven, with describing the undue influence and the illogical nature of the influence work, or is it attacking also? So if I understand what you're asking, what doesn't work are facts and logic and trying to persuade people whose minds have been hacked. What works is respectful, curious, and genuine, where you're asking a question and you're waiting for an answer, and you then can mirror the answer back. So if I heard you correctly, you were saying this and this and this. Is that correct? And then ask a follow-up question, because the person will exit themselves, not you getting them out of the cult. And that's what happened in my deprogramming. What worked was one of the 4 deprogrammers, all he did, his name was Gary, was say, "Hey, Steve, what do you think?" And he made me think. And I kind of told him how to get me out without being consciously even aware that it was my real self that was talking to him. Let's see, Jenny on Substack asks, what is needed to get our laws caught up with the neuroscience so we can hold cults accountable? How can we help your efforts in this? Please join my Substack. Please talk to influencers if you know any and tell them to invite me onto their programs. We want to build a much bigger community online. I just read a fantastic book by Emily Falk, F-A-L-K, at UPenn on what we value, on the neuroscience of decision making. And I reached out to her twice to invite her on my podcast. I have yet to hear back from her. But they're now doing functional MRI studies on different brain regions and how, when people are trying to make decisions, different regions are lighting up. And why this is important is it's connecting the neuroscience to social psychology. For example, I've been teaching the Asch conformity study for 49 years. Solomon Asch, A-S-C-H, was doing a, quote, visual perception experiment, only it wasn't. It was an experiment on conformity. And people would be shown a sample size line and then 3 sample lines of differing lengths. Only everyone in the room was in on the experiment except one person. They'd give the correct answer twice, and then they'd all confidently give the wrong answer. And what Asch wanted to know is how many people, even though they could see the correct answer with their own eyes, would start to agree with the group instead of stick with the facts of what they knew to be true. And so the numbers were about 60 to 65% started giving the wrong answer to fit in. And what I read in Emily Falk's book was that we have a self-referential system, but we also have a social approval system. And so a different part of the brain clicks on when we're in a social context. And so she used the example in the book of, you go to a restaurant, you've always ordered pizza there, what's your favorite food there, but everyone else orders something else, and people order what everyone else is ordering to fit in. It's not because they're weak. It's because our adaptive systems, remember, we're tribal. The human species has not been around that long in its modern form. And by understanding social psychology and neuroscience, we can change the legal system and update it, which was the purpose of my doctoral dissertation, how to update the law regarding undue influence. And I have my dissertation up on freedomofmind.com and a Spanish translation. And I'll add, we have a Spanish version of the influence continuum and the bite model, and we just published a Spanish edition of combating cult mind control. So check it out. We're really wanting to reach out to the Hispanic community. And if you're a Hispanic therapist who's a former member, please email me. I want to talk with you because we need your help to get the message out. Stark Sweetheart, looking forward to seeing your collaboration with Dr. Lee. Why don't you feel other mental health experts aren't speaking out or getting tracking? So Dr. Lee and I go back years, and I am quoted. I have a section in the latest edition of The Most Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. And Bandy has created the World Mental Health Coalition. I was one of the original members of it. And Bandy loves freedom of mind. So she asked me if she could use freedom of mind as one of the charter value systems for the World Mental Health Coalition. So please, and if you're a YouTube subscriber, you get to see next week's video a week early. That's one of the perks. We're trying to get subscribers onto our YouTube channel as well, so you can check out ahead of time. But check out Ann Nelson, and I've interviewed so many great, interesting people. Back to Christopher Jones. Do you have peer-reviewed studies of efficacy on extracting people from cults, actual empirical numbers? No, I don't. I wish I did, and I don't know how to do that, honestly. I'm late in my career. It's something that young therapists might consider, but I don't extract people from cults. And my system, which is detailed in my book, Freedom of Mind, Helping Loved Ones with Controlling People, Cults, and Beliefs, is creating an ethical group of family members, friends, ex-members, clergy. And I coach them on how to do mini interactions with the cult member, all aimed at empowering them to think for themselves. So it works when there's a team of people, when I have a single parent wanting to know and they've already alienated their loved one. My system is I can coach them on what not to do to make things worse. But it really works best when there's a robust community to help people. David, also, did you see the Jehovah's Witnesses governing body U-turn this past week regarding their views on additional education, aka higher education, being okayed by the governing body member David Splain? I haven't. Thank you for that. I can tell you that the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons were not included in the 1988 edition of Combating Cult Mind Control, because when I wrote the book, I didn't think of them as authoritarian cults because I didn't know any better. And once the book came out, I started getting deluged by letters, snail mails, from former members, former leaders, thanking me for the book, because they would read a book about a Mooney, an ex-Mooney, and there was nowhere in the book about the Jehovah's Witnesses or the Mormons, so it had yet to be banned by the governing body. I can tell you that both the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons have lost millions of people because of the digital world, because they wrote things down, and ex-members were scanning and putting it online and showing how the current administration's lying about the past and the leadership of the past and the change of beliefs. And the Mormons are doing a remake right now. They don't want to be called Mormons. They want to be called LDS, Latter-day Saints. And now the LDS are allowing crosses and encouraging people to call themselves Christians when they're not following the New Testament of Christianity. Let's see. Jess Clark on Substack asks, can you talk briefly about how OCD might be a complicating factor in leaving a high control religion? A psychotherapist here. Thank you for your question. So there are many people that I've had to that I was approached to help who had OCD, who had ADD, ADHD, and other learning disabilities. When somebody has OCD, it depends on, have they been officially diagnosed? Were they born into the cult, or were they recruited into a cult? But no matter what, the bottom line is, does somebody in a group have access to non-members who are willing to learn how to interact? And if you're a clinician, I have a CE course at CMEs for psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, and counselors. And it will give you the foundation for understanding how to work with people in this population. But there's not a quick fix with OCD folks if you can't get access to them. And I'll leave you with this because I don't think I said it in today's live stream. But what helps to get someone out of a cult, I already said, don't attack the leader, the doctrine, or policy directly. Talk about another cult that they would agree is a cult. With MAGA, what I found is most effective is talking about Chinese communist brainwashing and pimps and traffickers, and explain how they use the control of behavior, information, thoughts, and emotions to make people dependent and obedient. Because once they understand it in other case examples, then you can ask them questions about their experience, their group, and how it's different than this or this. So, but check out my TEDx talk. How can I know if I've been brainwashed? Please check out bitemodel.com. Please come to my Substack, Stephen Hassan, become a subscriber, and I'll see you on another live stream. And I'm hoping to do more live streams because people seem to really find me when I'm just spontaneously getting out there across their feeds. And thanks so much for your attention, and my team. Take care.